What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to From The Bench Vols. I'm your host, Will Meadows, and welcome back to our Friday edition of the show, where we have a lot of Tennessee football to talk about once again. SEC Media Day is officially over, so we're going to recap all of that. What is the national media thinking about Tennessee going into this 2025-2026 season? And then the guys that were represented Tennessee, Josh Heupel, Bryson Eason, Kitselman, and Arion Carter. What did those guys have to say about Tennessee, and what are some things that they kind of all really implemented on? We're going to talk about all of that and more on this episode of From The Bench Vols. But before we get into any of that, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, leave a like, leave a comment, share it to whoever you'd like. I greatly appreciate all the love that we've been getting on the channel as of late. And let's hop right into it. So obviously, like I said, SEC Media Day is officially wrapped up. This episode is pre-recorded just by a day. I usually record these a Friday episode on a Thursday night. I'm recording this on a Wednesday night because I said on the last episode that I'm going to be out of town. So Tennessee's done talking. That's kind of all that matters. And we've kind of seen, a day removed from Tennessee's members of the team talking, and Josh Heupel, what the national media is thinking about Tennessee and kind of how everybody's looking from the outside in, what they're thinking about Tennessee. So we're going to kind of talk about what Josh Pate thinks about that, a host of a really popular college football show. We talk about that a lot on this show. So we're going to hear what he has to say. He was at SEC Media Day. We're going to go over Josh Heupel's biggest quote of the day, in my opinion, and then some things that really all of the guys implemented, Arion Carter, Bryson Eason, Kitselman. And that thing, I'll start with that, I guess, is all of these guys, and even Josh Heupel, man, they were so consistent and beating not to beat a dead horse, but they all let everybody know that these guys are our leaders and that they are all making a point that they're getting these young guys ready. A lot of new faces, and we've talked about that a lot, especially with this position group spotlight series where I'm trying to get you guys up to speed with these new names. It's a lot of new faces. A lot of guys are not returning from last year's team, whether that's pass catchers, obviously Dylan Sampson, a quarterback, which we didn't understand or didn't think was going to happen, offensive line, defensive line, you name it. There's a lot of new faces all over the place, and that's some guys that have been in the program and are coming up, and some guys that are true freshmen. I mean, true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, those guys are going to get some run, especially we just talked about it with the linebackers. A redshirt freshman like Edwin Spillman's going to get a lot of run. And a couple episodes ago, we had the wide receivers. Guys like Travis Smith Jr. and Rodarius Jackson, they're going to get a lot of run as true freshmen. So, those guys all implemented and touched on a lot that they're trying to get those guys ready, and they're showing great signs of getting ready. Tennessee had their media day on, I guess it was Wednesday. Yeah. I was kind of down on campus during that, and I got the chance to see that Travis Smith Jr. is wearing number 1, Rodarius Jackson's wearing number 5. So, I mean, that's public knowledge. I mean, you could look that up, but I didn't really realize that, and you may be thinking, it's just a number on their back. Most freshmen in the Josh Heupel era have all worn 80 as a receiver, and number 1 and a 5, that's kind of showing you, man, that those guys are going to get some run. You don't really wear number 1 and then not play much, or wear number 5 and then not play much. Again, it may not sound like a lot, but it is. If you watch football and you kind of understand football, if you're number 1 and you're number 5, you're going to be out there and you're going to catch some touchdowns for Tennessee this year, and you're going to get a lot of run, regardless of how old you are. And they're saying that these guys are taking steps in the right direction. Again, on our last episode, we talked about how Jeremiah Thielander spoke very highly of Edwin Spillman this past spring, a guy who just had an unfortunate series of events with his injury last year as a freshman, a true freshman, but this year as a redshirt freshman. They expect him to make a big jump. So just a lot of new faces and a lot of young guys that don't have a lot of experience, whether that be as an SEC quarterback as an SEC player, because, Joey Aguilar, is he a new face to college football? Not at all. A lot of experience there. But, you're playing in the Sun Belt, not the SEC. It's a whole different ball game. It's a whole different level of speed and a whole different level of athlete when you're coming from Sun Belt to SEC. So it's just a lot of different situations. Like, it's a lot of new faces, a lot of young guys, but a new face of Joey Aguilar is still a lot older than a lot of these guys. So if you kind of get what I'm saying, it's just a lot of different situations, but regardless, it's a new face. The only real place that we have consistent returners at is that back half of the defense, like I talked about on last episode. Obviously, you're getting your cornerback duo of Ricky Gibson and Jermon McCoy. You're getting your linebacker duo of Jeremiah Telander and Arion Carter, you're getting a new face in Colton Hood, but Jalen McMurray is a returner, a solid starter, a solid depth piece. Andre Turrentine is a very experienced SEC starter. So outside of that, I mean, it's really new all over the place. I mean, there's some returning guys on that defensive line, but I mean, the offensive line, man, it's all brand new. Obviously, Lance Hurd is here, and he was here last year. Was a first-year guy last year, but David Sanders is new. Sam Pendleton's new. William Satterwhite's new. Wendell Moe is new. So it's just a lot of new faces, whether they're young, whether they're new to SEC football. It's new faces, and these leaders are making it a point to get these guys ready, and they're saying that they're making great strides. And then Josh Heupel talked about that a little bit, but Josh Heupel had quite a statement in mind. And Josh Heupel's, I mean, if you're a Tennessee fan, you know Josh Heupel, a pretty, not dry, but not a man of too many words. He's not going to sugarcoat a lot of things compared to some coaches that we've had in years past, like a Butch Jones was, I mean, a totally different guy than what Josh Heupel is. If just personality-wise, Butch Jones is going to tell you why Tennessee was going to be so good and what they're doing to be so good. Like Josh Heupel, and he's going to brag on, not himself, but brag on the program a lot. Josh Heupel's a more upfront, a very football guy, and he's wanting to represent the Power T and represent the program well. But he kind of went on record, and, you know, there's a lot of questions with Tennessee in the offseason this year, and he kind of went on the record and was saying, hold on, guys, I want you guys to, you know, kind of recognize where we're at the University of Tennessee. He said, quote, "A year ago, you look at us. We're top 10 in the country in 6 defensive statistical categories. Since we arrived at Tennessee, we lead the league in tackles for loss. Could not be more excited in what we've done, but also the future on that side of the football." That is kind of after he's talking about the history, that quote that went viral of what they expect on the defensive side of the football at the University of Tennessee, home to guys like Reggie White, Eric Berry, Al Wilson, stuff like that. He goes on to say, with the leadership and the players we have inside of our program, we're very excited about it. So that's kind of what he has to say about the defensive side of the football. Obviously, that clip of his quote went kind of viral about a year ago or less than a year ago about what they expect at the University of Tennessee on the defensive side of the football. And then he says, quote, offensively, we find a lot of offensively, we find a lot of ways to win. During the course of my career as an offensive coach and as a head coach, through the air and on the ground, we find a way to be elite year in and year out. You look at what we've done. 2 SEC Player of the Years in the last 3 years. 1 at quarterback, being Hendon Hooker, and 1 at running back, being Dylan Sampson. The last 2 years, we've led the SEC in rushing. The last 4 years, since we arrived, we've rushed for over 2,500 yards, 2,500 yards each year. That has never been done in the history of Tennessee football. Sorry about that kind of stuttering. Just had it all kind of scribbled out here and wanted to get that quote to you guys. But again, that's Josh Heupel at the SEC Media Day, just not bragging on himself, but again, there is a lot in the air and a lot of questions about Tennessee going into next year, and he's kind of letting everybody know, like, you know, is there questions about our quarterback? Yes. Did he get that question quite a bit? Yes, and he answered that. But there's a lot to be happy about at the University of Tennessee right now, and the football program as a whole, regardless of what happens this year. Now, obviously, go 4-8. That's not good, but it's going to be a year of up in the air, and that's what it's been all off season. But I mean, what Josh Heupel and his staff has done for the University of Tennessee in 4 years is just it's crazy if you think about where this program was a decade ago, which it sounds crazy, but in 2015, or obviously Butch Jones's team had all the talent in the world, man. I mean, defensive NFL talent, offensive NFL talent littered all over the roster. And we just seem to never be able to win the big games. Obviously, there was games like Georgia where, you know, you catch a Hail Mary, and those are big games. But you consistently, in my opinion, you think back to an Oklahoma game where you just have all the talent in the world, and you're up on a Baker Mayfield-led Oklahoma, and just coaching kind of makes you lose that game, in my opinion. Butch Jones played not to lose instead of to win, and that's just – the coaching is just light years ahead of what it has been in the past decade under Josh Heupel. So there's just so much to be happy about with the Tennessee football program right now. And then, That's kind of what he had to say. But also, like I said, he got asked the question about the quarterback. You knew it was going to happen. I mean, that's the number one question of the offseason. It was the biggest talk of NCAA football in the offseason. Just a huge, you get what I'm trying to say. The Nico whole thing just was huge. And when asked about the quarterback situation, he said, quote, "We don't have a set timeline. Somebody has got to take it, learn it, earn it, and take a job. We'll practice in a way where they get a chance to truly compete for it." So he does kind of confirm that there is going to be a quarterback battle for it. You kind of get the sense that it's between a Joey Aguilar, that it's between a Jake Merklinger. George McIntyre, I guess, is in that mix, but I just don't think that he truly is. I think that it's going to be Jake Merklinger and Joey Aguilar. I know a lot of you guys, I'm personally on the Joey Aguilar side of the fence. I think that he's going to be the starter. I think it's going to be hard for him not to be the starter. But I see it in the comments all the time. And there's a lot of you guys that think that Jake Merklinger is going to be that guy. They've definitely got their pros and cons. Obviously, Joey Aguilar's played a lot of college football. But Jake Merklinger, man, they have kind of not rallied around him, but he's got experience in the locker room under Josh Heupel's system, but with the guys. So as all this kind of unfolded with the Nico, like Jake Merklinger was your guy. You know, you find out the morning of the orange and white game that Nico's gone, and Jake Merklinger is who you kind of rally around. And they talked about that a little bit at SEC Media Day, and I felt like the leaders, Arion Carter, Miles Kitselman, Bryson Eason, they did a very good job of kind of, they didn't say it just out in plain sight, but they implemented very well, like, regardless of who this quarterback is, I'm sure, it's human nature to have a preference for those guys, but regardless of who it is, this team's ready to rally around that guy. Tennessee's so overlooked, in my opinion, through the national media and from the outside looking in, that there's no telling nobody's thinking that Tennessee's going to be they think this is going to be a gap year. You know, you take 7-5, and you look forward to bringing in the number one quarterback in the country in Faison Brandon and all the things like that. Like, these guys are ready to rally around the guy. They've kind of flipped the script on such a crazy offseason, and they're ready to compete. There's a lot of talent all over this roster, and they're ready to rally around a guy, whether that's Jake Merklinger or that's Joey Aguilar. Now, Josh Heupel also touched on a Joey Aguilar needing to work on his fundamentals, and if you watch the film of Joey Aguilar, man, it's such an interesting thing in my mind, and I've talked a little bit about it on this show before. I personally think that Joey Aguilar would fit very well in this offense. If you go watch some film, yes, does he have some questionable plays? For sure. He had an interception problem, especially last year at App State. But he's a gunslinger, man. Does he make the right decision all the time? No. But I think that this Josh Heupel system and this Tennessee offense, it's going to help him make the right decision. This offense is so RPO-based, and all right, I'm either going to hand this ball off to the Sean Bishop, Peyton Lewis, Star Thomas. You get what I'm saying. I'm either going to hand this ball off, or I'm going to throw this curl, or I'm going to throw this slant. Like, it's here, one read, go. And I think that's going to help limit the ability to not the ability, but I think it's going to help limit the chance of Joey Aguilar having to make a boneheaded decision. Not saying that a quarterback is made in Josh Heupel's system. I know that sometimes there's a lot of people, especially going into the NFL, that they feel like Josh Heupel's offense is making the quarterback good instead of the quarterback being good itself. We've seen Hendon Hooker was a lot better than Nico Iamaleava. Obviously, different play callers then. Alex Golesh was calling the plays and was the offensive coordinator during Hendon Hooker's time, but the ability of the player definitely matters. I hate that kind of narrative that it's a very plug-and-play and easy catered offense to a quarterback. But I do think that it has its pros, and that it can help Joey Aguilar become a better football player and a better quarterback for our system. He did say that he has to work on his fundamentals. If you watch the film, he has some boneheaded plays where he's got pressure in his face and he throws on his back foot or flat-footed. And it's kind of weird, like, excuse me, you see some upside. You see him throw off his back foot, and you're like, no, why are you throwing off your back foot with pressure in your face? But then it's accurate. And was it into double coverage? Maybe, but he put it on the money. So it's kind of, pick your poison, But you definitely see the upside there and kind of the bad. You kind of see the good in the bad, which, again, you don't want to see the bad, but Josh Heupel's quarterbacks have always been fundamentally sound. Sometimes they look a little like a statue in the pocket, but they're all so fundamentally there. If they could even help Joey Aguilar's fundamentals in the short time that they have, I think that he can become night and day compared to what he was at App State. And again, I know that it's a big jump from the Sun Belt to the SEC, and I'm not trying to get you guys to drink the Kool-Aid. But I truly do think that him and this offense can really, really work out. But I do see your guys' point with Jake Merklinger, so we'll see about that. But he touched on that, so obviously he's not going to go out and say, yeah, Joey Aguilar's our quarterback. It's going to be a competition, and we'll have to see what happens as we get closer to the year, who's going to be ready by week 1, and it wouldn't surprise me at all. I really hope this doesn't happen because I feel like it never ends up well for any team that tries to attempt this. But I hope they have a guy by week 1, and they don't go in saying, all right, we're going to let Joey, they're both going to see some time. Like, let one guy play. It's so hard to get into a rhythm as a quarterback if you're playing one drive and you know that if you screw up even a little bit that you're coming right out. They need to pick a guy. And it's kind of like the Joe Milton, Hendon Hooker situation. They were just in this situation in 2021. Joe Milton was the guy. He ended up going down, and Hendon Hooker just ran away with it. And that happens. Those guys were best friends. They trained every day, and they got each other better. But they need to pick a guy. And I think that Josh Heupel will definitely do that. But you can't, because as a quarterback himself, he knows it's going to be very hard to get into a flow as a quarterback, especially in the SEC. Syracuse is not a slouch of a first game. It's going to be hard to get into a flow. I hope they pick a guy, and we'll have to see when that is. But also, when they talked about Tennessee, that Tennessee was projected to win 8.7 games this season. How that's possible, I don't know. I don't really understand all that, but kind of a high line for a team that everybody thinks that this is going to be a gap year. If you would have told me that a gap year and kind of a down year for Tennessee football, the line was over 8.5 games, I'd look at you like you're silly. If you would have told me that a couple years ago before Josh Heupel was all on scene, I mean, that's incredible, man. I just kind of wanted to add that. Like, they're projected to win 8.7 games. I'm not saying I would be happy with 8-4, but I don't have much to say on this topic, but just think about that, man. A couple years ago, 8-4 would have been incredible for this program, and now that's seen as a down year for this program. So that kind of just adds on to Josh Heupel saying where this program's at as a whole right now. But that was just kind of crazy to me, and I felt the need to add that. And then kind of on a national media scale of it all, I told you guys we'd let you know what Josh Pate thought. He dropped a video on what that you can take away from SEC Media Day with Tennessee, and he provided an interesting perspective, in my opinion, and he said that this could be one of Josh Heupel's most important years of his tenure to date. And I was kind of like, well, are you being for real, man? Like, this is supposed to be the gap year. Like, if they're not okay, if they're not that good, then I don't know if people are going to hype or just going to go in on Josh Heupel. Obviously, they faced a lot of controversy in the offseason. And that's not what he was saying. He wasn't saying, like, if they're bad, then, it's horrible. But he was saying that if Josh Heupel can get this team to come be competitive, and they get some big wins down the road, and Oklahoma, maybe a Florida in the Swamp, and Alabama or a Georgia, they win the games that they're supposed to win, maybe they're 9-3 and don't make the playoffs, but they're in the right spot. And you're kind of thinking like, all right, Josh, you keep assembling these good defenses. Nobody thought that you were supposed to be, at this point, a 9-3 very competitive football team preseason after all the controversy that you just went through. And you've got the number one quarterback in the country coming to you next year. You're in a very good spot as a Tennessee fan. You're in a very good spot You're in a very good spot as the Tennessee football program as a whole. So I thought that was kind of just a unique way to look at it. If Josh Heupel succeeds with this team, not saying that this team doesn't have the talent to succeed easily. I've told you guys that they do. But with how the national media is looking at you, it's somewhat of a down year. If you can still succeed with all the controversy that surrounded your program in the last 6 months, and then you're bringing in one of your best recruiting classes yet with the number one quarterback in, who looks like an absolute stud, Faison Brandon does, you're in a very, very good spot as a Tennessee fan and as a Josh Heupel fan. I mean, it's only up from there. So, I mean, Josh Pate also says that he's not as high on Tennessee as some other teams. He kind of thinks that this is going to be a gap year and a year where they're just not near as competitive. Like that, Josh Heupel saw a lot of questions at SEC Media Day on. Excuse me. Josh Heupel saw a lot of questions on Media Day of, Coach, you went to the college football playoff last year. What are you going to do to get back there? And Josh Pate was kind of like, well, how do you know that they're going to be in contention for that after what they've gone through? Obviously, Josh Heupel's going to tell you that their goal is to win a national championship, and it sure as heck should be. But a lot of people just question, with all these new faces, should that even be a real possibility? Should that even be in the realm of possibilities? I think national championship, maybe not, but college football playoff for sure. So that's kind of what just Josh Pate himself thinks about it. A lot of people aren't as high on Tennessee this year, and the SEC Media Day kind of just proved that, in my opinion. You kind of hear from these other teams around the SEC, and they're just loaded, man. I mean, Georgia's supposed to have an off year, but their defense is still going to be nuts, as it always is. Texas, man, just 5-star, All-American, all over the board. They've got a 5-star who's sat for 2 years coming right behind them. I mean, they're just in a great spot. Alabama looks to rebuild in second year of Kalen DeBoer. I mean, LSU gets Barryon Brown and Nick Anderson out of the portal. Some good pieces on defense, and Patrick Payton. I mean, the SEC just looks locked and loaded, and Tennessee's just a lot of teams in the SEC. I'll put it as this, and then I'll kind of wrap this episode up. There's a lot of teams in the SEC right now. Obviously, the quarterback is the most important position in football. There's a lot of teams in the SEC right now that you can say, all right, if my quarterback doesn't perform to the level of expectation, that I have the guys around him to still will this team to win football games. So whether Arch Manning is what the hype thinks he's going to be, they can fall back on C.J. Baxter, and they can fall back on Ryan Wingo and this loaded defense that they're going to be okay. And at Georgia, if Gunnar Stockton's not that good, they can lean on that run game. They can lean on highly touted transfer Zachariah Branch. They can lean on the defense. Tennessee doesn't have the national media recognized guys where you can say, all right, we can fall back on this star-studded receiver. We can fall back on this run game. I personally think the run game is going to be just as good. We've talked about that on this show before. The national media doesn't seem to think so. We'll see. That's kind of been Josh Heupel's motto, is turning guys that the national media doesn't know too much about into absolute studs, as he just talked about in that quote. 2 of the SEC Player of the Years of the last 3 years. No one knew who Hendon Hooker was going into the year, and no one knew who Dylan Sampson was going into the year. So it's going to be very interesting. That kind of wraps up our SEC Media Day recap. Let me know if you guys have anything that you saw at SEC Media Day, whether it's Tennessee or just teams around the SEC that kind of have something to do with Tennessee that you guys would like me to talk about or anything like that. Again, this is a pre-recorded episode, so hopefully nothing big has happened that I can't get out to you guys. But again, I think that's going to wrap up this episode. I appreciate every single one of you guys for joining me on this Friday edition of From the Ball. Oh my goodness, about said From the Balls. From the Bench Vols. Goodness, that was bad. From the Bench Vols. I greatly appreciate all of you guys joining me on this Friday morning, Friday afternoon. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and go Vols.